imagine, imagine you build the perfect house.
Right, like your absolute dream house.
Exactly. You spend months sourcing the absolute best materials. You get imported timber, premium insulation, you hire master architects.
Oh, yeah.
You even get the interior design completely flawless, right down to like the cabinet hardware.
So no expense spared.
None at all. But you forgot to account for one thing. You didn't check the historical wind patterns of the valley you built it in.
Oh, no, that's a huge mistake.
Right. So the first winter hits, and the structural shear is completely wrong for the wind direction.
Yeah, and it just can't take the stress.
Exactly. Your perfect house slowly begins to just, tear itself apart. You had all the tangible, visible pieces perfectly placed.
But one invisible environmental variable just brought the whole thing down.
Brought the entire system crashing down. And, today in our deep dive, we are looking at a microscopic version of that exact scenario.
We really are. I mean, it's a masterclass in how invisible forces dictate the success or failure of the systems we build. And the funny thing is, we aren't pulling this from a structural engineering textbook or like an urban planning manual.
No, we are definitely not.
We're looking at a fish pond.
A fish pond on an apartment balcony, to be exact. So the source material today for you listening is a remarkably short, really unassuming journal entry from July 2, 2026.
Yeah, it's super brief.
It's an excerpt from a blog by an author named Ang, and it's titled Notes on Fishkeeping Part 280, Why Gourami Loves Water Hyacinth.
Which sounds so simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, in just about 180 words, Ang chronicles adding new plants and fish to this outdoor balcony setup.
Right.
On its face, you might just think, okay, someone is blogging about their pets.
Just a casual hobbyist update.
Exactly. But if you actually read the subtext of what Ang is observing, I mean, this tiny 50-gallon tub of water holds an unbelievable amount of drama.
It really does. It's incredibly dense.
It is this profound slice of life that explores, biological determinism, the illusion of control, and honestly, the terrifying fragility of microclimates.
Yeah, the density of insight in such a short post is exactly what makes it so compelling.
Right.
Ang isn't just listing, what happened today in the pond.
Right.
Ang is observing the raw mechanics of survival playing out in this artificially constrained environment.
Totally.
We are basically watching deep-seated evolutionary programming just collide head-on with urban constraints.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Let's start with the physical scene, because Ang sets up a brilliant natural experiment right out of the gate.
Oh, for sure. The balcony pond.
Yeah, Ang has this newly established outdoor balcony pond, and into this brand new, totally foreign environment, Ang introduces some aquatic plants and two very different types of fish.
A cichlid and a gourami.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you throw, say, two humans into a strange new room, they might both look around, check out the windows, maybe find a place to sit, right?
Yeah, there's a shared baseline of behavior there.
Exactly. But Ang immediately notes that these two fish behave as if they are in two completely different universes.
Which is fascinating,
Okay.
because they're experiencing the exact same body of water, right? The same temperature, the same lighting.
Everything is identical for them.
Exactly. But their spatial mapping is violently different. The cichlid goes straight to the bottom.
Just totally ignores everything
Yeah,
else.
it just roams the floor of the pond, entirely ignoring the new vegetation floating at the surface.
And the vegetation being the water hyacinth, or eichhornia-crassipes for the botany nerds listening.
Right, right. This floating plant with broad green leaves and this incredibly dense, fibrous underwater root system.
So the cichlid just, ignores it completely?
Pretty much treats it like irrelevant floating debris. It offers absolutely nothing of value to it.
Wow.
But the gourami's reaction is the polar opposite.
Yeah, Ang notes that the gourami is absolutely obsessed with the water hyacinth.
Obsessed is the right word.
It just refuses to leave the plant's dense root system.
Yeah.
It's constantly tucking itself up inside that submerged canopy.
Yeah, it's wild.
It makes me think about, giving a specialized tool to two different professionals.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. So imagine handing a highly calibrated laser level to a master carpenter and a master plumber. The carpenter immediately mounts it on a tripod, right? They map out a perfectly straight, load-bearing wall because their internal trade logic demands that kind of precise horizontal orientation.
Makes total sense.
But the plumber, whose main concern might be gravity flow and pipe pressure, looks at the laser level, decides it doesn't help them sweat a copper pipe, and just uses it as a paperweight for their blueprints.
Yeah, a really expensive paperweight.
Right. They are both looking at the exact same object, but their internal software dictates a completely different utility for it.
What's fascinating here is that internal software is millions of years of evolutionary coding.
It's hardwired.
Exactly. When casual observers look at a fish tank, they often project human whimsy onto the animals.
Oh, totally. Like, oh, the fish is hanging out by the little plastic castle today. He must like the castle.
Right, exactly. But Eng's observation cuts through that illusion completely.
Yeah, it's not whimsy at all.
No, the gourami is not hanging out in the roots because it has a quirky personality preference for shade.
Right.
It is executing a hard-coded biological script.
That's a great way to put it.
The cichlid's evolutionary software dictates that the bottom of the water column is where food is found and where its body shape operates best.
Right, so it stays low.
Yeah, but the gourami software screams that survival is intrinsically linked to surface vegetation.
And Eng doesn't just stop at noticing the difference, which I think is the coolest part.
Oh, for sure. The memory part is amazing.
Yeah, the journal entry makes this incredible leap from a present-day balcony observation to a childhood memory. And that's where we actually get into the underlying mechanics of why this is happening.
Yeah, it shifts from observation to analysis.
Right. So Eng remembers being a kid, going out into wild ponds and catching fish by specifically plunging a net underneath floating aquatic plants.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a beautiful moment of synthesis.
It really is.
Eng is looking at this one isolated gourami in a plastic tub on a concrete balcony and suddenly connects it to a broader ecological pattern observed decades ago in the wild.
Just putting the pieces together.
Right. Eng realizes, wait a minute, when I was scooping those wild plants, I wasn't catching just any random fish.
No, it's very specific.
Exactly. I was almost exclusively pulling up bettas and gouramis.
Which leads Eng to a really profound deduction. These floating root systems aren't just convenient hiding spots from predators.
There's so much more than that.
Yeah, they are the fundamental architectural prerequisite for these specific species to breed.
Exactly.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second, because I want to make sure I understand the absolute necessity here for our listeners.
Sure, go for it.
So gouramis and bettas, they survive in massive, chaotic river systems in the wild, right?
They do, yeah. Southeast Asia, mostly.
Okay, so they deal with floods, droughts, shifting currents. They don't technically need this one specific brand of water hyacinth to survive, right?
Well, no. Not to just stay alive day to day.
Right, so why is Eng acting like this particular floating plant is a structural necessity for the fish? Surely they could just, I don't know, lay their eggs on a rock or in the mud like a normal fish if the plant wasn't there.
That is exactly the trap of assuming all fish share the same reproductive mechanics.
Okay, so what am I missing?
If they were cichlids, yes, they might clear a flat rock at the bottom and guard their eggs down there.
Right.
But bettas and gouramis are what biologists call labyrinth fish.
Labyrinth fish, okay.
Yeah, they have a specialized organ that allows them, and actually requires them, to breathe atmospheric air from the surface of the water.
Wait, they have to breathe air, like, from above the water?
Exactly. Because they operate at the surface, their entire reproductive strategy evolved around the surface.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they don't lay eggs in the mud. They build bubble nests.
Bubble nests. So they are literally spitting air bubbles to create a floating raft for their eggs.
That is exactly what they do. The male goes to the surface, gulps air, coats it in a specialized saliva to make it sticky, and spits out a bubble.
That is wild.
Right. He does this hundreds of times to build a floating raft, and the eggs are deposited into that raft.
Wow.
But think about the physics of that for a second. You are trying to build a structure out of spit and air on the surface of moving water.
Oh, man. The surface tension must be incredibly fragile.
Very fragile.
Like, I'd imagine one strong gust of wind or a heavy ripple from a passing predator, and the whole nest just pops or washes away entirely.
Precisely. The bubbles alone are not structurally sound enough to survive an open water column.
They need reinforcement.
They need rebar. They need a structural matrix to anchor onto.
And that is where the dense, hairy, fibrous root system of floating plants like the water hyacinth comes in.
Yes. The roots act as the structural scaffolding for the bubble nest.
That is so cool.
The male weaves his sticky bubbles into the microscopic fibers of the roots, locking the nest in place and shielding it from wind and water currents.
So it's basically biological engineering.
It really is. Without that specific botanical architecture, the bubbles drift apart, the eggs sink to the bottom where they rot or get eaten, and the genetic lineage just ends.
Okay, that completely changes the stakes of Eng's journal entry.
It definitely raises them.
The gourami isn't just hiding. It is seeking out its mandatory maternity ward.
That's a great analogy.
It is genetically programmed to recognize the tactile sensation of those roots as the only safe place to invest its biological energy.
Exactly.
Aang wasn't just finding where the fish liked to hang out as a kid. Aang was identifying the environmental trigger for their entire reproductive cycle.
The environment and the behavior are inextricably locked together. You simply cannot induce the behavioral trigger, the breeding and the nest building, without providing the environmental trigger first.
These have to go hand in hand.
They do. It shows how profoundly specialized an organism's life cycle becomes when it co-evolves with specific flora.
Which, man, that makes the second half of Aang's journal entry so incredibly tense.
It really takes a turn, doesn't it?
It does, because here's where it gets really interesting. We just established that this water hyacinth is the architectural linchpin of the Gourami's existence.
It is the rebar for their future.
Exactly. But then Aang hits us with a devastating complication. The plant is dying.
The environment is failing its most critical component.
Yeah. Aang notes that despite the Gourami absolutely loving the plant, the water hyacinth itself is failing to acclimate to the balcony's microclimate.
It's just not taking to it.
It has started wilting, and Aang diagnoses the problem almost immediately. It's a lack of full sunlight.
Which is so common with balconies.
Right. The balcony simply doesn't get enough direct light hours to sustain that specific species of floating plant.
Yeah.
Aang writes, rather ominously I might add, that this is an area that definitively needs adjustment in the near future.
This raises an important question, though, and it's where we crash into the brutal reality of the microclimate.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, the trouble with an artificial balcony microclimate is that it lacks the buffer of a wider natural ecosystem.
Ah, okay.
In a sprawling wild pond, if a patch of water gets shaded out by a falling tree, the water hyacinth just propagates a few feet to the left where the sun is still hitting the water.
Right, it just moves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ecosystem has lateral flexibility. It can dynamically shift to maintain equilibrium.
But on a balcony on the 4th floor of an apartment building, the boundaries are hard concrete and plastic.
There's no 2 feet to the left.
Yeah. The sun hits at the angle the building allows for the duration the surrounding skyline permits, and that's it.
You are playing ecosystem manager, but your tools are drastically limited.
It's like trying to build a perfectly engineered utopia in a shoebox.
That's a perfect way to describe it. The irony of Aang's situation is staggering, honestly.
Because they did everything right.
Yes. Aang did all the research, bought the right tank, curated the perfect water parameters, selected a beautiful gourami, and even intentionally procured the exact botanical infrastructure required for that gourami to thrive.
They literally engineered the perfect setup.
But because one invisible variable, the solar trajectory over this specific balcony, was slightly misaligned with the plant's metabolic needs, the keystone species of the entire tank is collapsing.
It's the weakest link in the chain, but it's the most important link for the fish.
Exactly.
And it really highlights the hubris, or at least the immense burden of trying to replicate natural systems in artificial spaces.
It's so much harder than people think.
You aren't just taking care of a pet, you are forcing an entire biological supply chain to operate inside a vacuum.
Right.
If you get the lighting wrong, the plant dies. If the plant dies, the roots rot.
And if the roots rot, the gourami loses its structural scaffolding.
Exactly. The whole biological chain reaction stalls out simply because a concrete overhang blocked the sun at 2:00 p.m. instead of 4:00 p.m.
It demands active, continuous intervention. Aang cannot just let nature take its course here because the nature on this balcony is a synthetic construct.
Right, there is no natural course anymore.
No, there isn't. The wilting leaves of the plant are a brutal feedback loop from the environment, basically telling Aang that the system is unbalanced.
So what can Aang even do?
Well, fixing this requires Aang to step in, perhaps by installing artificial grow lights or physically moving the heavy pond just to save the plant.
Yeah, which is a huge pain.
It is, but saving the plant is the only way to save the biological potential of the gourami.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second and look at the sheer scale of the journey we just took from a 180-word blog post.
It's pretty amazing how much is packed in there.
It really is. We started with a simple observation of 2 fish reacting differently to a new room.
Right, the cichlid and the gourami.
From there, we mapped the cichlid's bottom-dwelling behavior against the gourami's obsessive need to hide in the roots.
Then we followed Aang's thought process backward in time.
Yeah, to a childhood memory in a wild pond, which unlocked the mechanical secret of labyrinth fish.
That they need dense, fibrous roots as rebar to anchor their fragile bubble nests against the elements.
Exactly. We moved from a static observation of spatial preference into the fluid mechanics of evolutionary survival.
It's a huge leap, but it makes perfect sense when you lay it out.
It does. And then we slammed right into the unforgiving wall of systems failure.
Yeah, the microclimate miscalculation.
We saw how even the most perfectly engineered, well-intentioned artificial environment can begin to unravel because of a single, invisible variable.
Like the daily duration of sunlight on an urban balcony.
Right. It is a complete narrative arc of environmental science and systems theory, just hiding in plain sight in a fish-keeping journal.
It really is. And I think that systems theory aspect is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, today.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you might never set up a pond, you might never own a gourami in your life.
Probably won't, let's be honest.
Right, but you are constantly building and managing microclimates in your own life.
So true.
Think about the systems you construct. Maybe you are launching a new product at work, or you are trying to organize your team's workflow, or maybe you're just trying to build a healthy morning routine for your family.
And we tend to focus almost entirely on the visible, tangible components of those systems, don't we?
Always. We make sure we have the right people, the right software, the right budget.
It's the equivalent of having the right water, the right fish, the right plant.
Exactly.
But Eng's journal reminds us that systems rarely fail because of those primary components. They fail because of the invisible variables we forget to account for.
The structural wind shear, basically.
Yes. You can have the most talented team in the world, perfectly equipped with the best tools, but if the microclimate of your office culture is slightly misaligned, if the communication structure lacks transparency, or if the incentive structure rewards the wrong behaviors, the keystone elements of your project will wilt, just like the water hyacinth in the shade.
The resilience of any system you build is completely dependent on your ability to observe it objectively.
You have to pay attention.
You really do. You have to watch for the wilting leaves. You have to recognize when the environment is giving you negative feedback.
Right.
And you must have the flexibility to adjust the invisible variables before the structural scaffolding collapses.
Observation is basically the only defense against systemic failure.
Very well said.
But, as we wrap up this deep dive into Eng's balcony pond, I want to leave you with a lingering, somewhat haunting thought.
Oh yeah, the unresolved tension.
Right. A question that stems directly from the source text, because we know the clock is ticking on that plant.
It is actively wilting as Eng is writing.
Exactly. Eng writes that adjusting the microclimate is something they, quote, definitively need to do in the near future.
But the future isn't here yet, and the plant is dying today.
Right. So what happens if Eng is too slow? What happens to the deep-seated, hard-coded biological instincts of the gourami if its necessary architectural environment completely dies off before the light can be fixed?
It's the ultimate clash between an unstoppable biological drive and an immovable environmental reality.
Does the fish's instinct to breed simply recognize that the necessary tools are gone and shut down to conserve energy?
That would be the logical thing to do.
Or does the overwhelming million-year-old drive for genetic survival force the gourami to attempt a nest anyway?
Oh, man.
Does it desperately spit bubbles into open water, watching its fragile raft be destroyed by the filter current over and over again?
Just continually trying to build a future in an entirely unsuitable, rootless environment.
When a constructed ecosystem fails, does the instinct surrender, or does it doom itself by trying to adapt to a broken reality? Just something to think about the next time you look closely at the seemingly quiet, simple world of a fish pond.